Hey, what's up, everybody? If you're enjoying the video, please hit that subscribe button and give a thumbs up. And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. It really helps support the channel and allows me to keep creating content for you guys.
My name is Ji-hye. I still remember the day I first visited my husband Minho's family home, my heart full of anticipation and joy. The wedding was just 2 months away, and I had dreamed of nothing but becoming part of a warm, loving family. My own parents had passed away when I was young, leaving me to be raised by distant relatives who never truly accepted me as their own. Perhaps that's why I was so eager to please Minho's family, especially his mother. "You must be Ji-hye. How lovely to finally meet you," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as she examined me from head to toe. "Minho has told us so much about you." The house was immaculate. A sprawling 2-story home in an upscale Seoul neighborhood with gleaming wooden floors and antique furniture that spoke of generations of wealth. Minho's father nodded curtly from his armchair, barely looking up from his newspaper. His younger sister, Sumin, offered a cold smile. "My son deserves only the best," his mother continued, placing her hand on my arm with surprising firmness. "I'm sure you'll make him very happy." That night, as Minho drove us back to my apartment, I couldn't shake a strange feeling of unease. "Your mother is very particular, isn't she?" I ventured. Minho laughed. "She just wants everything to be perfect. Once you're part of the family, you'll understand. We have traditions, expectations. But don't worry, she already loves you." I nodded, pushing my concerns aside. After all, wasn't this what I had always wanted? A real family with deep roots and traditions? Minho was successful, kind, and loved me deeply. His family's acceptance was the final piece to complete my happiness. How naive I was then. How desperately I wanted to believe that the cool assessment in his mother's eyes was nothing more than the natural caution of a woman protective of her only son. If only I had recognized that first dinner for what it truly was. Not a welcome but an evaluation. Not the beginning of a new family bond, but the first move in a game I didn't even know I was playing. The first few weeks after our wedding were like a beautiful dream. Minho and I moved into the small but charming house his parents had gifted us, just a 15-minute drive from the family home. "So you can visit often," his mother had said, squeezing my hands. "Family should always stay close." It began so gradually that I barely noticed. First it was just Sunday dinners at the family home. Then Tuesday lunches. Soon his mother was calling every morning. "Ji-hye, I need help preparing for the ancestral ceremony this weekend. Minho mentioned you aren't busy today." Not a question but a statement. Not an invitation but a command. I found myself at her house more and more frequently, always with some task waiting for me. Polishing the heirloom silver. Preparing elaborate meals for business associates Minho's father wanted to impress. Cleaning rooms that were already spotless. "A proper daughter-in-law knows how to maintain a household," she would say, watching me scrub the kitchen floor while she sipped her tea. "Minho deserves to come home to perfection every day." When I mentioned finding a job, putting my business degree to use, she looked horrified. What would people think? My son's wife working like a common woman without family obligations? Besides, I need your help here. Minho's father's health isn't what it used to be. Minho's father looked perfectly healthy to me, but when I tried to discuss it with Minho, he seemed distracted. "Mother knows best, Ji-hye. She's just trying to help you adjust to the family. Besides, we don't need the money." 4 months into our marriage, I realized I hadn't seen my old friends in weeks. My days were consumed with household tasks, not just for our home but for his parents' house as well. "Ji-hye, you've overcooked the beef again," his mother sighed one evening as the extended family gathered for dinner. "Perhaps if you'd been paying attention instead of chatting on your phone earlier." I hadn't been on my phone. I'd been in the garden picking herbs at her request. But I remained silent, feeling everyone's eyes on me. Later that night, Minho was unusually quiet. "Mother says you've been neglecting your duties," he finally said as we prepared for bed. "What? That's not true. I spend almost every day at your parents' house, cooking and cleaning. I hardly have time for anything else." He frowned. "She's just trying to help you become a proper part of this family. My father's family has maintained certain standards for generations. Mother had to go through the same thing when she married into the family. So she's doing to me what was done to her?" I asked incredulously. "Don't be dramatic, Ji-hye. This is how families work. You didn't have a traditional upbringing, so you don't understand. His words stung like a slap. My orphan status, always my most vulnerable point, used against me by the man who had promised to be my new family. 6 months in, I discovered I was pregnant. I was overjoyed, believing this would finally cement my place in the family. Min-ho was ecstatic, but his mother's reaction was unexpected. "Well, at least you've managed to do one thing right," she said coldly before launching into a detailed regimen of foods I must eat, activities I must avoid, and traditional practices I must follow. "I'll be monitoring everything, of course. This child is the next generation of our family. Our family. Not my child or even our child. The family's child." As my pregnancy progressed, her control intensified. She insisted I move into the family home for proper care. Min-ho agreed without consulting me. My few personal belongings were relegated to a small guest room. Our marital home stood empty while I slept alone, supposedly for my health. "Min-ho needs his rest for work," his mother insisted. "Your tossing and turning would only disturb him." Meanwhile, the household tasks didn't diminish, they increased. Despite my growing belly and swollen ankles, I was still expected to clean, cook, and serve. When I would become dizzy or need to rest, her lips would tighten with disapproval. When I was pregnant with Min-ho, I maintained the entire household without complaint. Today's young women are so fragile. One afternoon in my 7th month, I was sorting through some old financial documents his mother had asked me to organize when I found something strange: papers regarding the ownership of our house. The house that was supposedly a gift from his parents to us. According to these documents, it was still in his mother's name alone. Not even Min-ho was listed as an owner. That same evening, I overheard a conversation between Min-ho and his mother. "She's becoming difficult, Min-ho. Always tired, always complaining. Not at all like the girl you married." "She's pregnant, mother. I was pregnant once too. I didn't use it as an excuse. Your father's mother was twice as strict with me. I'm being lenient with Ji-hye because she doesn't come from a proper family. No guidance, you know." "I know, mother. You've been very patient. The inheritance papers are ready, by the way. Everything as we discussed. But remember, it's conditional on you maintaining the family traditions. Your father and I won't have our legacy squandered." I felt sick, my hand protectively covering my belly. What had they discussed? What conditions? And why was our house still in his mother's name? When I tried to talk to Min-ho that night, he dismissed my concerns. "Mother is just being cautious. Of course the house is ours. And as for the inheritance, that's between my parents and me. Nothing for you to worry about." I was worried. Increasingly, I felt like an outsider in what was supposed to be my family. Less a wife and mother-to-be than an unpaid servant whose primary value lay in producing the next generation. In my 8th month, during a particularly hot summer day, I was preparing a complex traditional meal for guests, important business partners of Min-ho's father. Despite my condition, his mother insisted I do all the cooking to show my dedication to the family. As I worked in the stifling kitchen, sweat dripping down my face, I overheard Min-ho's sister Sumin speaking to her mother in the adjacent room. "She's still so clueless, isn't she?" Sumin laughed. "Working like a servant while thinking she's part of the family." "Keep your voice down," his mother hissed. "She serves her purpose." Min-ho needed to marry someone malleable who wouldn't question the family business. Those society girls with their education and family connections ask too many questions. But what about when the baby comes? Won't she expect more freedom then? By then she'll be too invested to leave. Besides, the prenuptial agreement is clear: she walks away with nothing. Not the house, not support, not even custody. The child belongs to the family. I froze, the knife I'd been using clattering to the floor. Prenuptial agreement? I had signed papers before the wedding, but Min-ho had assured me they were standard documents, nothing that would ever affect us. "Just formalities," he'd said. "Trust me." "What was that noise?" his mother said sharply. I quickly picked up the knife, my hands trembling. "Ji-hye, is the meal ready yet? The guests will be here in an hour." "Almost," I managed to reply, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging inside me. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep before sneaking into Min-ho's father's study. It took me nearly an hour of searching before I found it. A copy of the prenuptial agreement I had signed along with other family documents. As I read through the legal language, my blood turned to ice. The agreement was extensive and one-sided. In the event of divorce, I would receive nothing. Any children would remain with Min-ho's family. I would be expected to leave quietly with no financial support. There was even a confidentiality clause preventing me from discussing family matters. But worse were the other documents, detailed reports about me dating back to before I met Min-ho. My financial history, my orphan status, assessments of my personality describing me as compliant, eager to please, and isolated, no strong family connections to interfere. They had researched me, selected me, not for Min-ho's happiness but because I was vulnerable, controllable. With shaking hands, I replaced the documents and returned to my room, my mind reeling. Was Min-ho part of this calculated plan? Had our entire relationship been a lie? The next morning, I confronted him as he prepared for work. Did you know what was in the prenuptial agreement I signed? I asked quietly. He paused, his tie half nodded. Of course. It's standard family protocol. Standard protocol to ensure your wife has no rights? To treat her like property. You're being dramatic again, Ji-hye. These are just protections for the family legacy. And the reports on me, the assessments of my character before we even met, was that also standard protocol? His face changed then, a flicker of something, guilt? Concern? Crossing his features before his expression hardened. My parents wanted to ensure you were suitable. Our family has enemies, competitors. We needed to be certain. Suitable. I echoed hollowly. You mean isolated and desperate enough for family that I'd accept being treated like a servant? That's not fair, he said, but he couldn't meet my eyes. My mother can be traditional, but she's teaching you our ways. Your mother has been using me as unpaid labor while undermining me at every turn. And you've allowed it. Encouraged it even. Lower your voice, he hissed. This isn't the time or place. When is the time? When I've given birth to a child who will apparently belong more to your mother than to me. When I've spent years being worked to exhaustion while being told I'm not doing enough. His face darkened. You're hormonal and not thinking clearly. We'll discuss this after the baby is born and you're more rational. Something broke inside me then. The last thread of hope that Min-ho would choose me, would protect me from his family's machinations. There's nothing to discuss, I said coldly. I've seen the truth now. I was never your wife. I was an acquisition, a convenient vessel for the next generation and free labor for your mother. He reached for me, his expression softening into the charming smile that had once made me feel so special. Ji-hye, you know I love you. Yes, my family has expectations, traditions. But we can work through this. After the baby comes, it will only get worse, I interrupted. Your mother has already told me she'll be making all decisions regarding the child. She's experienced. She's controlling. And you're so deep under her influence you can't even see it. His charming mask slipped, revealing a flash of the same cold calculation I'd seen in his mother's eyes. And what exactly do you plan to do about it? With what money? To go where? Back to those distant relatives who never wanted you in the first place. His words hit their mark with surgical precision. I had no family. No independent income. Nowhere to go. And now with the baby coming. I thought you loved me, I whispered. I do, he said, straightening his tie. In my way. But family comes first, Ji-hye. It always has. You'll understand someday when our child continues the legacy. He left for work and I sat alone in that cold, pristine house that had never been my home, cradling my unborn child and wondering how I had become so trapped. That afternoon his mother arrived unexpectedly. Min-ho called me, she announced, her eyes narrowing as she assessed me. He said you were behaving irrationally this morning. Hormones, I suppose. I remained silent as she bustled around, criticizing my housekeeping, my appearance, my supposedly selfish focus on my discomfort instead of family duties. After the baby comes, we'll need to establish a strict schedule, she continued. The child will sleep in my room, of course, for the first few months. I've already prepared everything. In your room. I finally spoke. But I'm the baby's mother. She waved her hand dismissively. You're inexperienced. Besides, you'll need to resume your household duties immediately. We can't have standards slipping just because of a new baby. And what about my wishes? My bond with my child? She looked at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. Your primary duty is to the family, Ji-hye. Individual wishes are secondary. Surely you understand that by now. In that moment, looking into her cold eyes, I understood with perfect clarity what my future would be. An endless servitude, my child raised under her controlling influence, perhaps to become another Min-ho, perpetuating this cycle of emotional manipulation and control. I understand perfectly, I said quietly. That night as Min-ho slept, I packed a small bag with essentials. I had been secretly saving small amounts from the household money for months. Not enough to live on for long, but enough for a start. I took nothing valuable, nothing that could be claimed I had stolen. Just my personal items, some clothes, and the small savings I had managed to hide. As I placed a letter on Min-ho's pillow, I felt the baby kick, strong and determined. In that moment I made a promise to my unborn child. We would find a different path, one built on love rather than control, on respect rather than obligation. 3 years later I stood outside the family home, my daughter Soo-yeon's small hand in mine. After leaving that night I had gone to a women's shelter, where I found not only safety but also legal advice. The prenuptial agreement, it turned out, had several vulnerabilities, particularly regarding child custody and the circumstances under which I had signed it. The legal battle had been brutal. Min-ho's family had used every resource at their disposal to paint me as unstable, unfit. But I had found strength I never knew I possessed. I had completed my business degree while working part-time and caring for Soo-yeon. I had built evidence of their manipulation, their control. And most importantly, I had created a record of Min-ho's emotional abuse and his family's treatment of me. In the end we had reached a settlement. Not perfect, but enough to secure Soo-yeon's future and give me a fresh start. Part of the agreement included this final visit. Min-ho's mother's last chance to see her granddaughter before we moved to Busan for my new job. "Are you sure you want to do this?" my lawyer had asked. "You don't have to see them again." But I needed this closure. Needed them to see what they had lost through their greed and control. Min-ho opened the door looking older than his years. The bitter divorce and scandal had cost him professionally. His carefully cultivated image as the perfect son and businessman had been tarnished. "Ji-hye," he acknowledged stiffly before his eyes fell to our daughter. Something like pain flashed across his face. "She's grown so much." "Children do that," I replied coolly. His mother appeared behind him, her imperious bearing unchanged though her hair had more gray now. "Bring the child in. It's too hot to stand in the doorway." Some things never changed. But I was no longer the naive, desperate young woman seeking family approval at any cost. "We'll stay only an hour," I said firmly. As agreed. The visit was tense, filled with his mother's thinly veiled criticisms and attempts to undermine me in front of Soo-yeon. But my daughter, though only 3, seemed to sense the undercurrents. She stayed close to me, regarding her grandmother and father with solemn, assessing eyes. As we prepared to leave, his mother pressed a small wooden box into my hands. "Family heirlooms," she said. "For the child. Her birthright." I started to refuse, but something in her eyes stopped me. Not warmth exactly, but perhaps a glimmer of recognition. Of respect, however grudging. "I'll keep them for when she's older," I conceded. "She can decide then what relationship she wants with this family." As we walked away from the house, Soo-yeon looked up at me. "Mama, are they our family?" I considered how to answer. "They are connected to us," I said carefully. "But family is more than blood, Soo-yeon. Family is love, respect, and care. We'll build our own family, one where you never have to earn love or feel like you don't belong." That night, after Soo-yeon was asleep, I opened the wooden box Min-ho's mother had given me. Inside were indeed family heirlooms, jewelry passed down through generations. But beneath them was something else. A folded document and a key. The document was the deed to a small apartment in Busan, not far from where we were moving. The apartment was now in Soo-yeon's name, with me as guardian until she turned 21. A note in his mother's precise handwriting read, "For her education. Some traditions are worth preserving." The key, I discovered later, opened a safety deposit box containing educational funds for Soo-yeon. And something else. A journal, written in his mother's hand, detailing her own experience as a young bride entering the family. The emotional abuse she had suffered. The control exerted by Min-ho's grandmother. the systematic breaking of her spirit until she became the very monster she had once feared. I became what was done to me, she wrote in the final entry. And now the cycle ends because you were stronger than I was. Protect her from becoming either of us. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of forgiveness, some wounds go too deep for that, but of understanding. Of recognition of the complex legacy of pain passed from generation to generation. As I looked at my sleeping daughter, I felt a chill. Had I truly escaped, or was I carrying invisible chains with me? Would the trauma I had endured affect how I raised Soo-yeon? Would I become overprotective, controlling in my own way? The battle wasn't over. Perhaps it never would be. The true test would not be in dramatic escapes or legal victories, but in the quiet, daily choices to break cycles of control and emotional manipulation. To build something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Outside, rain began to fall, washing away the lingering summer heat. Tomorrow we would leave for Busan for our new beginning. Yet as lightning illuminated the small apartment, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window, and for a haunting moment I saw not my face, but the stern, controlling visage of Minho's mother staring back at me. The cycle of pain and control was broken, but would it stay broken? Only time would tell if the legacy I passed to Soo-yeon would be one of strength and love, or if the shadows of the past would find new forms in which to survive.